everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we're going to be talking about exploring BDSM as a solo participant, and I wanted to do this because I recently made a video where I talked about tips and advice for kinky dating and how to meet kinky people and have a successful relationship. And I want to have this be a counterpoint to that, because I think it's very easy to fall into the mentality that BDSM is meant to be done within a partnership. It's meant to be done where you are part of some kind of like romantic, exclusive, monogamous couple. And I think that when you look at things like 50 Shades or Love and Leashes, of course you would get that impression, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can do it as a solo person and have different and very rewarding experiences. You don't have to be on that kinky relationship escalator, so to speak. And I think that when it comes to talking about this, I also want to be clear to point out I am talking about being a solo participant in BDSM, because I think there's a difference between being a solo person in BDSM and being single. Because I think typically when you're single, you don't really want to be single. You're like, I gotta find somebody, I need to go on dates, I gotta like get coupled up. And with being a solo person in BDSM, I think that much more has this connotation of like, I'm intentionally doing this. I am exploring BDSM on my own because that's what I want to be doing, not just because I've like failed to find a partner or something. And it's really unfortunate because, once again, even though our community talks itself up as being very inclusive and understanding, I think we do have some areas that we don't really fully address. I think being a single person or being a solo participant is one of them, because when you go to munches, sometimes people kind of look at you strange if you're going by yourself, or if you go to a high protocol party, you are usually expected to have a partner to bring with you. Or if you go to a class, especially if it's one that's about a skill, you usually are expected to come with somebody to practice on. Or when you go to like a rope skill share, oftentimes, depending on the environment, if you want to just like tie yourself or practice on your own, people kind of balk at that, like, oh, you doing it on yourself, like couldn't find somebody to tie with. Like, it's seen as though the reason why you are doing this on your own is because you don't have anyone else, not because like doing it on your own can be fun and different and rewarding in a way where, like, yeah, you don't have to be part of a couple to do BDSM. And it's very, I would guess, maybe a reflection of the amatonormativity that invades so much of our culture. And if you don't know what that is, great video I will link down below. And I think, you know, if you're aromantic or you just want to have time to yourself and you value yourself as a solo person, you want to have this centered on your own experience, doing this on your own can be a very good positive thing. But I also want to say, if you are a romantic and you want to do BDSM, you don't have to do it as a solo participant. Lots of different platonic, non-romantic kinky connections can exist as well. And some people would also say that doing BDSM is a type of like sensual intimacy that's completely separate from romance or sex, already all on its own. And I think actually starting off in the community and getting into a relationship right away can be something of a detriment. I think in order to understand how that compares with being a solo person in BDSM and the benefits that that has by comparison, I think it's worth evaluating kind of the typical path that a lot of people go down when they are discovering BDSM. So let's say, for example, you have a brand new person to kink, right? They've never done anything before, never really researched it, done anything like that. They just like discover kink one day in a book or a movie or TikTok or something. They do some Googling, they discover FetLife, and they discover the BDSM test, and they take the BDSM test, and they find out, without any knowledge first, to just go through all the questions, that they are 98% submissive, 0% dom, 0% switch, okay? They just are purely a submissive, according to that test. And they take that knowledge, and they go to FetLife, and they make an account, and they find a munch, and then they go to the munch, and then at the munch, they find a dom, and it's just great because they're single too and they totally hit it off great. I mean, sub, dom, match made in heaven, right? And then they go off and they start talking to each other outside of the munch and they start doing scenes, and then before you know it, they're in a closed monogamous DS relationship. And depending on the person and how quickly this all ends up happening, they might not ever go back to another munch. They might not ever take a class or go to a dungeon. They probably end up playing in private because most people that do BDSM play in private. They never go to a party, they never go to a dungeon, they just do it on their own by themselves. And with that means you don't really have any examples of how other people do BDSM. You've never seen a scene before. You've never watched anyone else play. The only things that you know are what your dom tells you, what you have read in a book, and possibly some other internet research, which is not the same thing as going to an in-person dungeon, though I try at least to make it an informative process, even though it is only just a video. And so that means that you potentially have a very limited experience of BDSM. And this does not have to be a negative thing, right? If this is you, if you are a very romantically driven, monogamous person, you're not comfortable seeing other people naked, you don't want to watch other people do scenes, it kind of grosses you out, you just don't want to do it, that's totally valid, totally normal, totally fine. I totally get it. But I think a lot of people end up boxing themselves in unknowingly because that's the route they go down. They decide their whole fate within BDSM without really a lot of example or information. And it's not as though we have a bunch of really great media representation to go off of here for kink, right? We're kind of in the dark about all of this, and so we don't necessarily really know what we really want until we either experience it or see somebody else do it and then decide we also want to try it. And that process can take a very long time. And I'm not saying this is wrong to do. I don't think it's always a bad idea to do BDSM with an existing partner if you're already in a vanilla relationship, or to find someone really quickly. I think sometimes fate is just funny like that, and we find the right person at the right time very quickly, and it's easy breezy, not a big deal at all. You don't really have to go through the process of multiple relationships to find the right one for you. And if you're so lucky, awesome, great, super happy for you. But I think also that experience can kind of be like figuring out what you want to major in university. Some people know right away, I want to be a lawyer. From a young age, they want to be a lawyer, right? And they tailor their whole school career with the goal of being a lawyer in mind. And they take 4 years of Latin, and they join the debate club, and they go to university, and they get a really great pre-law degree figured out, and they do that whole program, and then they go get a law degree, and then they graduate, and then they become a practicing attorney, and then they do that for 30, 40, 50 years maybe even, and then they have a great career, an amazing life, and it was the right choice the whole time to be a lawyer. They love it as a job, perfect, amazing, couldn't ask for better. But other people, we go to university, we don't know what the heck we want to do. We take a bunch of different intro classes, we change our majors 4 times, we spend 6 years doing a 4-year degree program because we keep adding on different minors or switching majors or doing different things on the side besides just going to university. And sometimes it is a very wibby, wobbly, back and forth path to get to the end of it. Sometimes we think we want a 4-year bachelor degree from a public university, and then we decide, actually, I want to go to a music conservatory. I want to go do an art program at a totally different private school. I want to go back to community college and actually get an associate's degree or go to a trade school. There can be a lot of different paths to getting to that higher education or just figuring out what you want to do with life. And it's not always so straight and narrow. Sometimes you think you're going to love something and you get 2.5 years into a program and go, wait, actually, I hate communication though. I hate communications as a major. I got to change it. Not an example for me, by the way, just picking it randomly out of the air. Or other times you love so many different things you can't pick because you're oh, I love history and I love Arabic and I love psychology and I want to do all of it, but I can't do all of it because I don't have unlimited time and unlimited money, so I got to pick something. And it can be a very difficult process, but you can learn a lot about yourself through that process of discovery, of switching around and trying new things. And I think that process does also have value. And it's just natural to change over time, like with the BDSM test, right? I think a lot of people, even still to this day, take that test every year because oftentimes your percentages and what you are mostly changes a little bit as you learn more, try new things, focus on different areas of kink. You know, one year you might test to be 98% submissive, but then the next year you're only 70%, or you suddenly score 98% dominant, or submissive is like way down at the bottom. You know, like for me, I used to score like pretty middling on non-monogamy on that test, but these days, because I have more experience doing polyamory, I've seen more relationships, I've had more relationships like that, I feel more secure in it, and I know it's what I want in my life, and so non-monogamy ends up being a lot higher. But maybe if I'd never had the opportunity to try out non-monogamy in a relationship, that might not be a score at all. But because I never got to try it, I wouldn't have even known about it or known that it could have been a possibility that I would have been really happy with or even ended up actually preferring. But getting back to my leaping into a DS relationship after meeting one person one time at a munch example, I also want to evaluate what would happen long term in that relationship a little bit. What's maybe more common? Because maybe, let's say, you end up staying in that relationship for 5 years, 10 years. What ends up happening? What's really good? And what do you maybe miss out on? I think you can have a very deep, fulfilling relationship that ends up being very connective, and you do learn a lot in that. But I think also you might miss out on certain things. There are literally hundreds of options for different kinks, and if you're only ever playing at home alone, you don't really do educational stuff outside of like immediately what you already know you want to learn how to do, you don't really explore a whole lot, you might be missing out on whole areas of kink that you could otherwise really enjoy. Or maybe your only impression of them is like kind of a passing stereotype, like, oh, I could never be a little because I don't like pacifiers, or I don't want to wear a diaper, when in reality, if you had seen other people doing it or talked to the right person at a munch or seen somebody at a party, you might have found out that being a little could have been really fulfilling for you. Maybe no pacifiers, no diapers or anything, but maybe something about that dynamic would be very healing for you or just enjoyable. You might just in general miss out on opportunities to share perspectives or learn new things from other people, or have somebody that can be a reflection on your relationship and check in with you and say, hey, like, is this still working for you? Do you still want to be here? And it might even end up being that you feel like something is off, but you're a submissive, you're in this relationship, that's the way you are, and you might not really have the language to be able to describe how you want it to be able to change or what needs to shift, or you might not be allowed to change at all because the only change in the relationship is supposed to be the dominant telling the sub what to do, and so it's not really your place to ask for something potentially radically different. And this might seem kind of hyperbolic and sort of out there, but I've seen this happen in degrees with certain people. I think a lot of people, for the sake of the relationship, can twist themselves into pretzels trying to maintain being something that is no longer really fulfilling for them because it's the relationship, I am a submissive, and really holding on to that one initial instinctual identity as like being what they are, and then not being able to move away from that. If you are not able to change and grow and learn new things, that can feel very restrictive and uncomfortable over a long enough period of time. And it can end up that you are controlled by this desire to always maintain being a pure sub or a pure masochist or a pure dom, because if you move away from that, you're lesser. You changed your mind. Like, oh, if you have to change it all, that means what you were before wasn't really true or good, and so now you're a fake, or you didn't really know yourself, and it's like seen as a detriment to really radically alter a relationship sometimes. And it might even be the case that you are lying to yourself or altering who you really are because you have to be that thing for your partner. Like, yes, you do really want to be a dom or sub, but then in your relationship you have to pretend to be a little or a pet or a service sub when that doesn't feed you at all, but it's what your partner wants and what you have assumed or learned is a core part of being what you really want to be. And it really sucks to feel trapped like that. Like, you have to keep being a thing for the sake of somebody else, and then you're losing sight of you in that process. And so being a solo participant allows you space to focus on you, not what the community expects or what your partner expects, but you, what you genuinely really want to be. Your growth, your exploration of BDSM is not constrained by the size of container given to you by a dominant partner or a submissive partner. You get to just explore what you want at the pace you want to for as long as you want to. If you decide, hey, I want to explore wax play, you can do pickup play, wax play scenes with 10 people and not worry about the constraints being placed on you by other people or by your adherence to keeping the relationship going and having the relationship as like a separate entity be the focus of what you want to maintain. And you can change how you interact with the BDSM community. You can not only focus on like finding a partner, but you can focus on volunteering and meeting new people and doing pickup play and hosting fun parties and having platonic connections and making friends, doing literally anything else other than focusing on just like, I gotta find a person to like kinky settle down with, basically. Like, you're not on that escalator of like trying to get to this one pinnacle experience. And I think our community does a lot of disservice by focusing on that as like being the thing to get to, is like getting to a collared DS relationship above anything else, because then you don't necessarily have those other connections and experiences that can be so rich. And even once you have them, if you decide at some point, I no longer want to be solo, I want to find a partner, those solo experiences, though they can be intimidating for the wrong person, they can give you so much more information about how to make a really rich, deep, complicated relationship that maybe initially you could have gotten there too, but maybe it would have taken you longer, or would have been a lot more of a struggle to get through and get to, because you have another person to consider that you are committed to and their desires and their limits and their boundaries, as opposed to thinking about yourself. I mean, heck, you might even discover that what you get out of being part of the BDSM community isn't actually doing BDSM at all. Maybe you prefer to watch or facilitate others having experiences. Maybe you just like helping out, and that's great. Like, if you decide, hey, I don't even really like want a partnership, I don't even really want to do BDSM as a scene, I just like helping other people, like a kinky little like helper elf going around and like cleaning up and organizing and helping to run events. That's also a really great and valuable thing to do that our community oftentimes need more of. The people that are willing not just to chase relationships, but also to help build the community for the sake of the community. And I do find that folks that begin their journey in BDSM consciously choosing to be single, I think they generally have a better time overall in the long run, because then they're not like falling into relationships that don't really work long term, or they take their time to really learn about like red flags and what works for them individually. Because I think it's so easy to lose sight of the you when you're focusing on the us, as I've already discussed here, right? We're like, you might end up subsuming your own values and boundaries and limits for the sake of somebody else if you don't get that time on your own first to really, really be solid in them and really know what you want. Because when you don't really know what you want first and then you get in a relationship, it's easy to be like, oh, whatever you want, dear. Yeah, sure, that sounds fine. Like, if you don't really know already where your comfort is and where your desires are, it's much easier to end up in a scenario where you're just going along with what the other person wants. Not always, but it can be. And with the wrong person, with the wrong intentions, I think this is why a lot of people that are like sort of the stereotypical older experienced male dom. You know, why isn't the 50-year-old guy going after 40, 50-year-old submissives? Why are they going after the 20-year-olds, the 18-year-olds even? Like, why do they always go back to that pool of people? And it's oftentimes because they kind of get off to the idea of like breaking in a new person and like showing them what a real dom is, and not always a great thing to be doing. Actually can be a very limiting thing. And I think maybe even if you don't end up in a relationship right away, but you really want to be in a relationship, having that sort of soul focus, nose to the ground focus on like, I gotta find a person, I gotta date someone, I gotta do this, that means that you're missing the whole experience of BDSM, because you're focused here, but the experience is way out here, and you're missing, you know, smelling the roses basically, or I guess smelling the leather. I suppose in this case, you're missing out on the other little things that can be so enriching. And I think also, and I talked about this in a recent video too, oftentimes we talk about relationships and connection as though like your best shot of having meaningful long-term connections is with kind of a committed, long-term, living together, monogamous, romantic sexual partner. And I think that's not always the case. I think that that can be a good way to have a fulfilling connection, but it's not the only way. And staying consciously single, staying on your own as a solo person, allows you literal just like more time and space and energy to have other connections besides those. It can also be fulfilling, right? Like having friendships and finding a gaming group and having platonic play partnerships and having a support network and just like being around other people, not only thinking about like, can I date this person? Are they available? Do they like me? Do they want me in that way? Like you can just focus on that process of making other connections. And I think actually sometimes our very single-minded focus on being not single can lead us into making poor choices about relationships, but also like not focusing on other relationships that really matter. And like even in a very like selfish way, like having connections in the community is so important for vetting, and having a support network or a support group is so important for being able to know like, hey, is this healthy, or is this okay, or does anyone else feel like this, or like, is this person safe to play with or not? And if you're only ever focusing on meeting that one person, you kind of ignore everything else, again, you're missing out on experiences, you're missing out on things that could potentially be really good, really helpful for your long-term journey. And it's just fun, it's fulfilling. I think people, again, there is a stereotype that like the best kind of BDSM is this like, you know, monogamous closed partnership where you do this like really mutually intense like emotional scenes. And I think actually going back through my memory, a lot of, though not all of, my favorite scenes have been ones that are like with groups or with friends or with connections that weren't necessarily just like a committed DS relationship, where I got to do things I never would have been able to do within a committed like monogamous partnership because of the other connections that I've had over the years with other groups of people and with friends. And I think foregoing that would have made my BDSM experience just like not quite as good. But I do want to be really clear once again here, I don't think it's bad to be a couple or to discover kink together in like a monogamous marriage and stay that way. You don't have to date other people or date around or sleep around or anything like that. It's just about like how that can be limiting in ways that people don't necessarily realize are happening, because you have the blinkers on of like the relationship, and because so many people don't really want people they're in relationships with to do certain things with other people or to look at certain other people certain ways, like they just don't really engage with the community as much, and it's a little bit less common for someone to be comfortable in a kink environment and to go to parties if they are strictly monogamous and do not want any kind of potential intimate interaction or even just looking at people in that way, you know? So it's complicated, and I think that being a solo participant can be a very good thing. And I think if we can kind of shift our mentality as like, you know, being single is wrong and bad and we shouldn't be single and that means something bad about me, and focusing on like how it can be good and rewarding and the important role you can play in your community and with finding friends in that, I think that just like focusing on it like sort of the negative way of thinking about it to the more positive way of thinking about it. Or it's not even just like thinking about it differently. Also the way you act and behave becomes different, and that can also be more positive. Like the solution to our loneliness epidemic we apparently have here in America, like I don't think the solution is like getting married younger or casual sex or hookup culture. I don't think that really does much of anything. I think what is more likely to help people feel connected isn't just like chasing after that relationship. It's, again, finding friends, finding community, investing in that, and investing in yourself, honestly. Like I've talked a lot about in this how you can like do pickup play and like have more platonic connections, but solo BDSM can also mean playing by yourself, with yourself, doing things like self-suspension or self-needle play or self-wax play. That's also good and valid, and even self-collaring too, right? I've talked about that in other videos, and I've talked about a lot of this in other videos, actually, as a matter of fact. So if you want to know about that, links down below. But yeah, I think that's about what I wanted to say for like the benefits of solo exploring. It's about having that room to grow on your own, not having your growth altered or changed in some kind of invisible way, or visible way actually, by somebody else, and getting to really truly be who you are, as opposed to like the you that grew in the shape that it did because of the container you were in at the time, and just getting to be totally free, totally open. You get to be your own person. You get to be your own unique individual self as you would be on your own, not based on what other people want or expect from you. At least less so, right? Because we always have like community pressure and expectations and self-imposed expectations as well. But gonna try to not ramble anymore here. Thank you all so much for watching. I would love to know your thoughts in a comment down below. What did you think about this? Any other tips, advice, perspective you have if you've been single for a long time in the community, or have had problems finding partners, or you've chosen like, hey, I want to solo participate in BDSM. This is how it's been really rewarding for me, not having any kind of like committed romantic connections. I would love to know all your thoughts again in a comment down below. And if you have not already and you would like to, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related content. And then finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. Link to that will be down below. If you do already support over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.